All right, everybody, it's relationship time. And today's lesson is I have really fucking smart friends who run massive 8 and 9 figure companies like the one on today's podcast. And he breaks it down at a level that you won't even believe. We talked about how you can design your life with intention, not by accident. The 2 major elements that determine if you can drive a relationship quickly, how prolonged exposure is the secret to success. Just because you're uncomfortable in the moment doesn't mean you should stop. Perfection is the enemy of greatness. And then to have a standard of perfection is to have no standard at all. We talk about e-commerce, mistakes that are made, how to design your life, how to get results, and how to get everything that you want in one jam-packed episode. So without further ado, I'm going to invite you to go listen to this one, and I want you to share it. Send it to 5 friends, and I mean it. Fucking send it to 5 friends, please, because this one is loaded with nuggets and your friends are going to think you're a genius for sharing this wisdom and implementing it with them. So without further ado, let's cue the intro and let's get into the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. Today, I have one of the most interesting men in the world, and I believe he's the only man on planet Earth that can pull off a Mohawk better than me. From mountain climber to adventurer to riding a bike across the country to doing Everesting ×2 to raise money and awareness for autism, being one of the dopest human beings, a relationship master, and a guy I met when I bumped into him in a line at a coffee shop. And my wife's like, "Do you know Brad?" And I'm like, "I don't, but apparently Brad knows everybody." And so today I'm honored to be joined by my friend Brad. So Brad, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, man. Always good to hang out.
Yeah, man. I love it. I'm stoked to have you. And this is like, I feel like I'm getting like gifts because it's the second time we've talked in 2 weeks because I was on your show and I'm like getting my fix of Brad.
Yeah.
So nice. I might even like swing by the office because I'm doing an impromptu surprise trip to Austin next week. And so I might text you and just like, what's the address? I'll come swing by for a hug.
Oh, you should for sure.
Yeah. And then, so I know what you do. I know how you do it. We'll get into that later. You found Easy Pay Direct, all of it. But one of the things that I fucking love about you, and I feel like you've been in this game just as long as me, is you said this thing on your website, and I saw it the other day, and you're like, I can think of every experience, every business, everything I've ever done, and it's always come back to a relationship.
Yeah.
And I just want you to expand on that one for a minute, because everybody I know knows you. Everybody, one way, shape, the way that we roll in circles, they're like, oh, Brad's got an answer. Oh, Brad knows. Like you embody and master this. And so has it always been that way? Is it something that you've always prioritized from the beginning? Or like, how did you get to that point?
No, very much not. And I think that, like most things in my life, there was a deliberate approach to it. And so, I take pride in trying to be deliberate in how I tackle things. And I'd like to find myself, 10 years from now in a place that I chose to be in, as opposed to just end up somewhere. So probably 15 years ago, I started going on these sort of serious adventure, like endurance athletic adventures. And at some point, people ask you when you do weird physical shit, they're like, why do you do that? And some of it is sort of casual and passing. And then some are, seriously confused and baffled by it. And some are actually critiquing. And so I had to reflect on it and think, well, why do I do this? Because I was giving these off the cuff answers and to see if I can and to push myself and because I'm a badass. And those were not adequate answers for me. So as I dug in, I thought about what I was really getting out of these, significant endurance adventures in my life. And what I realized was that the biggest thing that I was getting were deeper relationships. And that led me down this path of thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to these crazy lengths, ultimately because they fuel relationships, what is it about that that's valuable to me? And as I thought more and more about it, I got into this game of, well, what are the other things that are important in my life? And how does that tie into this notion of relationships being the important thing? And what I came to was that everything in my life, every major business experience, every personal growth experience, every valuable thing in my life can be tracked back to some relationship that I have. And had I not had it, I wouldn't have found myself in that place. And so years ago, with that recognition, I started deliberately creating the experiences to make sure that I was investing in the relationships, building the relationships, and designing environments that would fuel that. And that's big. I mean, it was big for me. And it's truthfully, I make an effort to align that behavior with my business life. And sometimes it feels easy, and sometimes it feels like, I'm blowing off the office to go be social, and there's a push pull there. And so it's a dance.
Yeah, when you say intentionally creating those experiences, like I think about this, right? Like I trademarked relationships beat algorithms, but it's very much a science and an art form, right? And so when you're thinking about the harmony of like running Easy Pay Direct or going into these experiences, like what do you do or what do you think about when you're designing these things? Like how are you trying to structure? Are you trying to create connection? Like when you go get coffee, is it by design? When you go speak on stage, is it by design? Like what goes into your thinking when it comes to embodying that kind of relationship ethos, and like how do you do it?
So I believe that there are two major elements to driving relationships quickly. And let me reframe that and say there are two major elements to figuring out whether or not you are going to connect with somebody quickly. Because there are people that you just, you're not a good fit for, right? Or I'm not a good fit for. And that's great. But I'd rather find that out right away than have this sort of half-ass, belabored commitment to trying to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
Like if it's not a good, business client fit, or it's not a good human to human fit, fuck it. Let's cut it off. There are enough people in this world, enough other prospects in this world. Let's move on. So the two elements for me are, I believe, that drive relationships quickly are unique experiences and emotional engagement. And unique experiences can be as simple as if you and I go to a brand new place that we've never been to, that is going to stand out in our minds because you and I are new to this place. And so it's a unique experience in this place. If you go to, picnic in Austin and you've never been there before, it becomes a unique space. But if I've been there 15 times, it's not unique for me. And if we've both been there a lot, if I throw a coffee at the wall, like that's a silly example, but we're going to remember that Brad threw a coffee at the wall during this one time, right? Yeah. So it doesn't have to be this epically unique thing. It's just anything that stands out in your mind, right? And the more unique, I think, the more likely it is to stand out. And emotional engagement can be a lot of things. On the small scale, it can be opening up vulnerably, right? It can be sharing something challenging. It can be energy and excitement that uplifts. But again, it's this thing that is different than the norm. And my chosen mechanism for this that I think is the most fun are these adventures, right? Mm-hmm. And when I do endurance adventures, dude, I'll tell you, when you're 5 hours into a run or sweating and you're with somebody, you get pretty emotionally raw, and you're going to behave in some, early internally stressed version of yourself, and you get this real raw version, and it either connects you with the person you're with or it pushes you away. But I think those are the elements for me.
Yeah, I love it. It's even to like summarize it down, like one of my favorite ones when you talk about in the very beginning, like not every relationship is yours, right? I had a shaman say this to me. It's like every relationship happens for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and it's not our job to dictate which one. And I know in the early stages of my entrepreneurial career, I just wanted to quote unquote be friends with everybody, but I was basically hoarding emptiness, right? And it was the word that you used was belabored, right? It was like I was emptying myself and pouring into things that weren't getting poured back into, but there was never really a reason for them to exist. There was no reason whatsoever, minus that like hoarding the acquaintance potential And so when you said that earlier, when you say like going deep and raw, like one of my favorite things to do is like at the coffee shop. Someone's like, hey man, how's your morning? I'm like, it's been fucking hard. I'm happy to be here, but Jesus, I just want to break. And they do one of two things. They're either like, they stop the conversation. I'm like, well, you really didn't want to know how my morning was. Or two, they lean all the way in and you see this like this eyes light up, right? And they're like, oh my God, this is a real person. That's not this some transaction of like holding the door.
Yeah.
And so when I do it, that's why I made that hoodie unapologetically authentic. I'm like, if you meet me, you're going to know all of me very, very quickly because we're going to figure out really quickly if this is a fit, right? Pink shoes, Mohawk, swearing, dropping it, and I'm an open book. And so I love that. I love it. It's so huge. So unique experiences and then emotional engagement. Now, I have a question about the endurance stuff, right? I've done crazy things. I tied a world record for a standing box jump. Like I remember in Afghanistan, like
I want a video. Videos or didn't happen.
Yeah. It happened in Afghanistan and it happened by accident. So it was like 2010. And I started CrossFit in Afghanistan because, of course, that was like at the peak for the military. So they were building us these CrossFit gyms in the middle of the desert. And we were doing Fight Gone Bad and we didn't have enough boxes. So there were only like 5 boxes. And so I used a shipping container, which was like only like 40 inches, right? But I was like, oh, I'll do it. And when we finished the workout, we got into a pissing match and we're like, well, who can jump higher? And so we just started stacking weights on top of it without any thought of anything going on. And there were probably 6 or 7 of us out there. And I jumped the highest and we measured it and it was 53 inches. And I didn't train, I didn't do anything. And so that night, one of my Marines went and Googled it and they're like, you know, the world record's only 56 inches. And I was like, what? That's 3 inches. No shit. The one thing to remember, though, when you get to that height, it'll take an inch a year to gain because there's a lot that goes into it. But I was like, I'm going to do this. And I knew, and you and I were talking about this before we recorded about like this personal accountability and having it built in. I knew that if I didn't say anything, I'd never do it. So I went and told my command that I was going to tie the world record. Well, they told the fucking news stations back in the US.
Oh, that's
and so this whole story started spinning. Staff Sergeant, U.S. Marine in Afghanistan, aiming to tie the world record. And I was like, shit, we got to do this now. Because I did an interview in like 4 months with like the Boston Globe and everything else. And so we would do crazy stuff like that. I did end up tying it. And then the guy who held it, Ryan Moody, was waiting and he'd been training for like 2 years. So I tied it and then he broke it like a week later and added like 3 inches. And I was like, all right, you know what? My glory days are gone. He's got 4 inches on me. Like I said, I did it. But the reason I'm saying this is like, there's this Japanese term called the masogi, right? It's like going out, doing hard things, challenging yourself, pushing yourself. And I know in those like hard endurance events, right? It's an amazing place to connect with a lot of other people. But I have found that in those, they've also been extremely rewarding for me building a deeper relationship with myself, like pushing past the edge and finding what's there. What's that like for you? Because I know what you've done from riding across the country to climbing what was it, 56,000 feet in 36 hours up Stratton Mountain?
Yeah, 58, but you know, we're close.
Yeah.
What's 2,000 feet?
Yeah, no, 58,000 feet. Everybody was doing it once to do Everest, and you're like, I'm going to do it twice, right? Like, what's your process like going into that? And like, how is that relationship with yourself? Because they've been some of the most rewarding parts of my life is doing those hard things. But is it the same for you now? Like you find something deeper, you find a lot of value in like going out and doing that by yourself and the training and the process of it. But like, what's that like for you?
You know, I mean, I'll start by saying that when I say it's about relationships, within that, I include the relationship with myself.
Yeah,
for sure. And it's a huge component to it. And it's not just the event, it's the training too, right? It's the commitment to training through it. And one of the things that, one of the reasons that I think that I like endurance as opposed to these short bursts is because you have to live in the space. And, you know, if I want to go push the limit and see how fast I can run for, you know, a 10K, it's a really finite amount of time. And yes, the intensity level is going to be much higher. Heart rate's going to be much higher, but it's short, right? It's like the mentality of, can I do this for another 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour is very different than the mentality of, oh, I'm just going to be here for another 20 hours, right? It's a very different headspace. And so I look at I look at those things as the phrase I use is the inevitable suck. And it's not a question of when this particular event is going to suck. Or it's not a question of if it's going to suck. It's when it's going to suck. And learning to be comfortable in that space. And I think that's the lesson that crosses boundaries into the rest of life and into business is just because you're uncomfortable in the moment doesn't mean that you need to stop in the moment. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's the wrong activity or wrong behavior to be doing just because you're uncomfortable in the moment.
So yeah, go ahead. Keep going. I was just going to ask you to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I'm in some respects looking for those things. And I think that the challenge that I have at this point is twofold. One is that while it definitely crosses boundaries, it's become clear to me that I can do it in the physical side. And it's very different in the emotional side, right? Or the focus component of business, right? So if I'm sitting and I lose focus after an hour, that becomes much more frustrating to me than if I'm, exercising for 5 hours and I know I have to go for 8, right? I know that I can do it. And I think the only thing that's true there is that I have many, many, many more reference points on the physical side indicating to me that I can do it. And even though I can logically connect the dots from one to the other, I don't have the same reference points. And I think that's the fuel that I have from a physical perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so then when you come over into like business, and we'll get into what you do in a minute, I can imagine, how long have you been doing endurance events like this, by the way?
I go through spurts with them, but the first one was 2007. So I sort of randomly invited myself on a bicycle ride from Los Angeles to Boston. I had never been on a road bike before, ever. And a friend of mine who's a crazy adventurer, this guy, Carl Drew, I saw him and I was like, so what crazy shit are you doing next? And he goes, oh, well, I'm riding a bicycle from Los Angeles to Boston. And my, somewhat retarded brain thought, oh, I know how to ride a bicycle. I could do that. Omitting this huge chunk of information, which is I'd never been on a road bike ever. It was just, to me, it was a bicycle. Sure, I can just ride a bicycle. So that was the beginning. And, but I think in the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's become more appealing. And I've also this is around maybe 8 years ago, around the time when I had this revelation that I wanted to have more deliberate things to build those relationships. So probably, that period.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because like in the beginning, didn't you get started in entrepreneurship, like doing sales for a company?
Yeah.
And then very quickly went from like, I'm doing sales to like number 1 out of 30,000 people.
Yes. So I grew up in sales with vector marketing, which is Cutco.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. And so and oddly, my first Cutco manager ever has been in town all weekend. So I've gotten to hang out with him. He's a very, very good friend now. But there are a bunch of people that were sort of in that ecosystem that are all very close. So John Rulin, Hal Elrod, this kid, John Berghoff, we're all 40 now.
Was Hal in the Cutco world too?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know Hal was in there. From Cutco to Miracle Morning. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Hal was I met Hal in 1999.
Whoa.
Yep. At maybe early 2000 at a national conference in Laguna Beach. And we've been friends since. And now Hal lives in Austin.
Yeah.
And is equally crazy, but in a different way.
Hal and I used to be neighbors in Temecula. So we were
no shit.
Yeah, I would see him around town and bump into him. And it was a small world. Now I'm just hiding in Montana. He's in Austin, but Austin's my second home that I refuse to take residency up in because plane tickets are really easy to get there, but I'm not moving there and, we're good. So that's where I am.
Well, in fairness, he is also kind of hiding in Austin. He's not really in Austin. He's out in the middle of nowhere now.
Yeah, I know. I think that's been like the clutch move for everybody. So I have I have a question about this Cutco thing, right? Like I was never in like an MLM, never in like Cutco, never anything like that, pampered chef stuff. How quickly So like I kind of want to know a little bit because I feel like there's some massive lessons in here. So you come into Cutco and then very quickly you kind of elevate up. And I know relationships are the secret, but that's a pretty dog eat dog world. That was like pre-internet really. That was like door to door connection.
Oh yeah.
Like what was that like for you? And like where did you invest your time or what do you think are the principles that like led to that success that you still carry forth today?
Yeah, I think that there are two really important sides of this, and the first is Vector Marketing as a company, and so Vector Marketing is the marketing arm of Cutco. They are responsible for all of the sales at Cutco, and Vector as an organization is a it's different today than it was, but it is a brilliant, structured, led organization. They largely leveraged college students in the summer, and but they're really a management, recruiting, training, sales organization,
Okay.
right? So they would recruit 30,000 college kids a year. They'd train them to go sell knives door to door, basically, and have this whole sales infrastructure to keep the kids engaged. And both the sales training and the leadership, the awards, the recognition, the ceremonies, are what do it. Right. Look, the product is amazing. Like really, truly, the Cutco product is guaranteed forever. It's US made. It's, the best steel you're going to buy. It's guaranteed forever. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. It sounds like you used to work at Cutco.
Right. Exactly. So it's a tangible product. So you can use it, see it, compare and contrast with what you have, and it's notably better almost always. So there's that, right? But to keep kids engaged to do this on a commission only endeavor, you've got to be running a good organization. And so I have a lot of respect for that system. And I learned a lot of things there. Namely, when you're working with 18 to 22-year-olds, you need to teach the fundamentals of life. So, scheduling, discipline, habits, personal development, all of those things I learned inside the walls of Vector Marketing. And ultimately, at the core for me, my personality is that if I figure out how to do something and I have a goal, I can just do more of it than other people. And that was it. I got a little competitive, and it was like, oh, you're number one right now. I'm definitely better than you. I can do more than you. And the irony is that I'm not. I never thought that I was a better salesperson than the other people. I just knew that I could outwork them, and I did. And so that there are ups and downs to that today, because now the goal for me is I can put in the time, but I struggle on some levels as a CEO to balance me executing versus me leading. And how I perceive those things is an evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm fucking horrible at sales, but I'll out relationship everybody. And so that's basically my whole ethos. I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I was like, I just make it either annoy you to the point where you don't want to talk to me anymore, or I annoy you to the point where you're like, this is really a good decision. But it really comes down to work. So now this is kind of a perfect segue. So did you, did you go from Vector Marketing or Cutco directly to founding Easy Pay Direct, or was there a gap in there?
There were little bits. There were some transitional moments, but it was pretty much for the sake of conversation, it was a direct transition. Okay. And when I got to the end of the Easy Pay or the Cutco era for me, I got to this point when I was 22, and I looked at where I was, and I had, if I hammered out college, I had 18 months of 18 credit hour semesters back to back to back to back. But I got to this point when I was 24, and I had finished a year, probably 2004, finished that year. And I realized that if I wanted to do something else, I kind of looked at my assets, the inventory of who I was and what I could do. And I realized that I had a list of, call it 3,000 Mrs. Jones. And I thought, what the fuck am I going to do with the list of 3,000 Mrs. Jones? And we're sort of at the advent of the internet. And so I had friends that were diving into e-com and diving into internet marketing. And I thought, nothing is the answer. I'm going to do nothing with 3,000 Mrs. Jones. uh, and I have no residual income and I'm just hustling. Every year starts over. And am I going to sell knives my whole life? And the answer was no. Pretty resounding no for me. So I started to build a list of criteria of things that were important. And that was one of the first things that I did that was critically important as a business person and as a human. And it was stuff like no cap on income, location independent, recession resistant, the ability to make a lot of money fast, which payments does not, B2B, and tech focused. And B2B was one of the most important elements because that was the relationship driver. And the reason that I had B2B on the list is I knew that at the end of whatever thing I did, I wanted a network and a community around me that would allow me to transition to the thing after that, whatever that would be. And to date, that is the most valuable part of my life are the relationships. If my world explodes somehow, right? If the company collapses and I, make some really, really, really horrible, terrible decisions, it would take a lot. The worst case scenario for me, like truly worst, is I get hired by a friend as a CEO for, $1 million a year to run a company. With plus. Mm-hmm. The realistic worst case right now is that I start another company with other friends and it's fine, right? But that's all a product of that one criteria that I set in 2006, which was I need to be in B2B. I need to be selling to other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I love this. Like, even the collapse of like from the beginning of this is like coming back to like designing unique experiences by design, designing life, designing all of it. Like, you're now living, 16, 17 years later in a byproduct of the intentionality of like just writing down on that sheet, like what's important to you. And then I think more importantly, having the discipline and the ability to honor that, even if it doesn't feel right in that moment.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, man. And so just for everybody listening, I didn't do this. Can you explain to everybody what Easy Pay Direct is? This amazing company that you run that I refer everybody to, but you're better at it than me.
Sure. So Easy Pay Direct, I think in simplest forms, helps people accept payments online. And so that's predominantly credit cards and ACH payments. We're integrating crypto into our stack currently, but we really focus on helping people optimize the way that they accept payments online. So there are some core problems that people run into online. And one of them is having transactions decline when they shouldn't if you have a subscription. Another is having your account closed or having money held by your provider. And that is phenomenally common with payment facilitators like Stripe or PayPal. Mm-hmm. And it happens with tons of merchant account providers, but Stripe and PayPal are fundamentally different. So if you, and I could go down that rabbit hole, but if you Google, Stripe held my money, you will get tens of millions of hits. Well, that happened to you too.
Oh yeah, me too.
So, we built some software and have a service that caters to those businesses and helps eliminate that problem, or heavily reduce it and get people out of tough situations. So, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, Grant Cardone, Frank Kern, Fortune Builders, Jeff Walker, all like a massive chunk of the info product community uses us for that reason, our education community. And then we're very heavy in SaaS. We're very heavy in supplements and some other verticals, but really e-com in general is our wheelhouse.
And just for the one person listening or the few, any pre-qualifying, like somebody has to be doing $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, or what's that like for you guys?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say that until you're probably doing $250,000 a year, so 20 to 30 grand a month, it just doesn't matter that much.
Yep.
Like truly, use Stripe or PayPal or whoever until you're at that, 10, 20, 30 grand a month, and then worry about this problem. We have the biggest impact for businesses that are $1 million and up. And I usually, it's $1 million to about 100 million, where the impact is like, our clients are our evangelists in that wheelhouse. Yeah, look, if you're under 250 a year, and truly if you're under $500,000 or $1 million a year, don't focus on how you can save a couple bucks. Focus on how you can grow. Like you need to not pay attention to the details as much as you think you do. And you need to focus on eliminating the noise and just fucking growing. And it's a super common mistake.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you to unpack this because I love the seat that you sit in as like the CEO of EasyPay Direct and what you do, but you've also been in this game for a long fucking time and you've been around the block and you know everybody in this game and their mother. And so I want to unpack that one a little bit because hearing you say it is so validated and credible from all the experience that you have and what you see. And so can we expound on that one a little bit in like the complications of that mistake and like what to really focus on? Because I know for me, a lot of the questions that I get asked with people I coach is they're spending a lot of time like nuanced in the weeds, analyzing the weeds, adding more weeds, but they're not doing anything on the front that's going to actually help mitigate that. So can you expand on that a little bit? Because I love how you said it and it landed.
Yeah. I think that first and foremost, you need to be clear on what drives revenue in your business and what activities are actually doing it. And you really need to assess that on an ongoing basis, right? When you do whatever planning you do, if it's as simple as Sunday nights or Friday afternoons or Monday mornings, you look at what's on your calendar and think about how you're going to spend your time. You got to segment that into what's actually growing the business. It's really easy to trick yourself into believing that a bunch of bullshit is going to grow your business or that it's important. But the core here is, and I'll speak from the EasyPay Direct perspective for a second because it's easy to illustrate that, and then I'll speak from my own. From an EPD perspective, clients that are under $300,000 a year, and even more if they're under $100,000 a year, we get a disproportionate amount of calls from those clients. Like I'm talking 10 times as many calls from those clients than we do people that are over $1 million a year. Now, if you're a business owner and you just heard that, and you're doing less than $100,000 a year or 300 or 500 or whatever, the lesson you should take from that is that your counterparts, these other entrepreneurs that are doing better than you, are not focused on what you're focused on, right? If the $100,000 a year entrepreneur calls us 10 times a month or a year, and the $1 million entrepreneur calls us once a year, that should tell you that their focal point is something else. And in our case, those calls are usually like, hey, I ran this transaction for $5,000 and I got charged X instead of X minus 1. Right. And it's like, hey, man, you're just focused on the wrong thing. And look, I don't care whether we make an extra dollar on you. The point as an entrepreneur is you're focused on the wrong thing. And my journey is that I refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist.
Yes.
I want everything to be perfect, right? Inherently, I grew up that way. I will both credit and blame my father for this. Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep. It's been a fantastic asset in a lot of areas, right? I strive for excellence. And when you are growing, specifically when you are growing quickly, perfection is the enemy of greatness. And to have a standard of perfection is to have no standards at all. You're never going to get there. Fucking let it go, right? Get V1 done and move to V2. I'm sorry, then probably move to V1 of something else and you'll get back to V2 never,
I love that. You said perfection is the enemy of greatness. What was the second part of that?
The second part of that was a quote that I read on the wall in a bar in Windsor, Ontario, which is across the bridge from Detroit.
Yeah.
Yes. And I wish I knew who it was, but it was to have a standard of perfection is to have no standards at all.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, I was talking to Anthony Trucks yesterday, and he said something so resonant. He said, in order to succeed, you have to be at peace with the pieces.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I was like, write that one down, put that on a t-shirt and remind me. But, I think in this, and what I love is like your experiences. You've been in this game a long time. And even listening to like your endurance adventures and the things like that, like you're like, I have to live in that world. I can't get out of that world, right? Just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do or I should stop doing it. And in business and in entrepreneurship, like what you were just saying is like, you have to know what moves the needle in your business and you need to look at it often. You have to audit your time. Like you even reference like once a week on Sunday, where am I spending my time? But I was the same way. Like the perfectionism of like everything's perfect, every tech stack works, everybody comes in, like designing this ideal world ended up costing me and losing me about 50 grand a month because I was so romantic about how perfect it looked that I was
Yeah.
missing all of the things that were out there. And my favorite thing now, I'm like, fuck it, it's always guaranteed to break. Like always. Like there's no way to mitigate this. And so um now that you are in that boat, you're in that boat now as a CEO, you're balancing like vision and execution. And even at like your level, you guys are going through like a massive migration. How do you
Mhm.
balance, taking a look at that? Like you get 10 to 1 calls of these entrepreneurs that aren't even qualified and where they want to go, right? And that takes a lot of like team capacity. And then you have like the right ones that come in. So now as like a CEO, like how do you balance your time to make sure that you're driving the needle and driving revenue and understanding these things? Because like when you have however many customers you have and clients you have, changing a tech platform could be like a year's project, right? So what's the mindset and the things that you look for in that now? And how do you balance that old perfectionism, which doesn't belong, but like making sure you're focused on what matters?
Um, I think the simple thing that I'm about to say is also the hardest, which
Sweet.
is right. It's what can you let hit the floor? What can you just not do? And it's the hardest because in our case, for example, I could say, man, we just don't work with clients that are under 500,000 a year. That's it. Done. We will lose that revenue. But quite honestly, that choice would probably serve us very well. My inherent and that's not what we do, right?
I know it's not
but
what you do. Yes.
but it could be. And so the other in our choice has been how do we look at because if I'm going to work with the clients that are under that amount, they also need to be served and they need to feel like they're being served and they need to have a world class experience. And I need to cultivate an internal team that is going to respect that and want to work with those people too and want to help them. And despite some of the questions being remedial relative to, the upper end clients that don't ask those questions. Um, so I think the other is how do you automate away some of that, right? And how do you position that product differently? And so we want to, do the knowledge based stuff as much as possible. We want to create automated solutions for those people. We want to create a different client experience that isn't as high touch and maybe gives the answers automatically that we think they're gonna have or that we know they're gonna have. Um, and that's been our approach is, if we've got all these flags and we've got this, our onboarding platform is called EMAP. It's the electronic merchant application portal. And the onboarding process has a whole bunch of logic built into it. And a few of the flags that are set are based on, industry type, marketing model, volume, experience, a whole bunch of stuff. And then we can decide what client experience that person is going to have based on what kind of business they have, where they are in their journey.
Yeah, I love this, and I'm going to talk for a minute because this is something I say all the time. I say my job isn't to find my ideal clients; it's to create my ideal client, right? And so when I think
Mm-hmm.
about revenue, like revenue generating activities, I actually split them up into 2 buckets. I have a revenue generating activity and I have a relationship generating activity,
Mm.
and I look at them equal, right? Like for me, in what I do, and I think you're the same, revenue is important for me, but relationships are just equally as important to me. And I love that you say that. So one of the reasons I'm saying this is Brad is incredible. Like I can have Joe Schmo on the street come up to me with a problem. And I know Brad's not going to ask me who they are, how much money they make. I'll send an intro and they'll get taken care of. And I feel like it's a testament coming all the way back to like by design of like looking at that one sheeter, like I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, and willing to protect those relationships over everything, knowing that it'll turn into referrals, it'll turn into revenue, it'll turn into those things down the road. And so I absolutely love that. So number one, thanks for being an example. Number two, thanks for fucking doing it right. Number three, thanks for caring. It's incredible. And so now I know why my wife, now, 9 years ago, she's like, you should know Brad as we're standing in line for coffee. I was like,
Well, yeah, I just look, I don't believe in altruism. I don't think people are selfless. I don't think that they do things for the greater good. At the end of the day, even the person that you perceive to be the most selfless, they're doing it because it makes them fucking feel good.
Fuck yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
so inside a business, it serves me and it serves the company to put relationships first. And so, don't be mistaken, right? I'm not doing this for the greater good of humanity, right? This is a profitable, driven organization. And it's just clear to me that, serving the staff at the highest level and trying to cultivate a culture and community internally where the staff is taken care of, serving our clients at the highest level, regardless of their size and volume, and serving our vendors, our partners at the highest level, regardless of challenges that we have. That's what makes all of it as profitable as possible, and also makes it more fucking fun.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't want friction. And then the points that you said are how they serve us very directly, which is, sometimes we get somebody that comes in and it's a $10,000 a month business. But guess what? Bob also has an $8 million a year business, and he just didn't vocalize it.
Yep.
Right. This is just his new startup that he's doing to try something on the side. So you're going to disregard Bob because he has a $10,000 business? No, it's a terrible decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love, and actually, you said something I want to ask about, right? Because like what I love is that how big is your team, by the way? Like how many people do you guys have on your team?
About 20. So we've got maybe 10, 12 in-house, and then the others are distributed.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the reason I'm asking, right, is because like when I've known you for a long time, I meet you, you embody everything. You embody the relationship, you embody the value, you embody all of it. You have a movement around what you stand for. And then you have an experience that you want to create for your customers. How do you go about managing that culture so that your staff and your team, whether it's a team of 1 or a team of 20, embodies the same beliefs and can act on their own accord to execute those beliefs?
Yeah. I'm a terrible person to ask that.
I know, but you also do it. So I feel like there's some wisdom wrapped up in there.
Yeah. I think that I think I'm very much in the middle of that journey. And I think that that's the journey of growth. And one of our core values is growth and internally. And I don't have a great answer to that. I can tell you that what I'm living in right now is getting people on the team that do a better job in the areas that I'm deficient. And one of them is management. I'm a great leader, and I'm a driven relationship person. I'm a pretty mediocre manager because I have this general mentality of like, why the fuck aren't you doing your job?
Yeah.
Like, just fucking do it. What are you talking about? And there needs to be some fuzzy gloves on sometimes. And I'm not great at the fuzzy gloves when I'm in execution mode.
Oh, you're mediocre. I'm horrible. I'm amazing at leading, but like, yeah, that's why Ashley's on my team. Her self-named title is CE Ashley O. She's like the mom of the team and managing everybody. And I was like, cool. I was like, we'll keep that going right now. And so now earlier, and I want to talk about this. I did an entire podcast on this, but you're kind of living proof of this concept of like by design, right? Like my life by design, my business by design. Like you talk about environment, you talk about creating personal accountability, and you're at a space now where you can basically do whatever the fuck you want, right? And the level of personal accountability required to maintain focus on the things that matter is probably a little bit greater. So like, what are some of the things that you do to set yourself up to win, to hold you accountable, whether it's in your office, your rituals, your habits? Like, what are some of your go-tos that like keep you in the focus of doing what you want to do and keep you accountable to doing it?
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing at the core is pre-plan things and block things out, right? So I have days that are focused on certain activities, right? So on Mondays, I focus on operations. On Tuesdays, I focus on marketing. Wednesdays, it's marketing and sales. Thursdays, it's operations. And Fridays, I try to reserve for strategy. and also sales. But having those containers helps me schedule and stay in line and make sure that I'm hitting the boxes, checking the boxes, and also helps my assistant and other people on the team that are trying to fill my schedule. So I think at the core, it's like elements of planning. Then it's other guiding rules and guiding principles. I'm a firm believer that it is within discipline and structure that you find flexibility and freedom. And the most chaotic, anxiety-ridden space that you can possibly be in that totally lacks freedom is having no structure, is having infinite decisions. And so these parameters that you put in place are what allow you to have accountability and create growth and do whatever the fuck you want in your life. So one of them, for example, is I don't drink on Sundays. I do drink. I like to drink. It's very social. It's a fun lubricant. I'm a fan. But I don't do it on Sundays because I need that reset day, and I need it to not. I cannot be off point on Mondays. So, and by the way, especially when you're in a young, fun tech downtown community with unlimited options, Sunday fun day is real, and brunch invitations are real, and I love them. But it's an easy rule to have, and sometimes I'm fought with violating it, or with the internal struggle of violating it. But it again is those parameters and structure that allow the freedom in other areas of life.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like in Austin, I think my friend Angie Lee said this. She's like, basically, once I moved to Austin, I became a professional friend. Like it's like an entire new role because there's always a baby shower, an event in the park, a social gathering. Like it is such a concentrated amount of people. So I have a question. I actually never asked anybody this, but you're somebody I highly respect. I admire on all fronts, on the personal front, the business front, the way that you think. Where do you go to learn, like to get your information? Like, do you have a intentional consumption? Do you read books? Do you try to balance? Like for me, and it's easier to say this, like I have a rule that like I have to earn the right to consume. And so if I want to consume, I have to create first, right? Because if I'm consuming, I'm technically building somebody else's vision. And for me, that accountability is like, oh, if I want to watch a YouTube video later on X, cool, let me go record 2 podcasts of my own first. And I kind of earn that right. And I'll pick up books and things like that. But I would be curious to know, like, how do you get your knowledge? How do you learn? Like, what do you look for? Do you go out intentionally and like try to find a book to solve a problem? Or do you kind of like window shop? I'd be actually curious to know.
I heard Ryan Holiday say the other day, and I've heard this notion before, but I heard him say, if you want to be an interesting writer, you have to be an interesting person, and you have to lead an interesting life. And so, relative to content production versus ingestion, I believe that I have to be in a place where I'm consuming other people's stuff to get new ideas. And I have to be around interesting people to get new ideas. And kind of back to relationships, I'm a part of a number of different entrepreneurial groups. I don't need to sit in the fucking room to be getting what I need to out of those exchanges. I don't even need to sit in the room to learn subject matter expertise, right? When I'm sitting at the bar or on the beach or on a run with another entrepreneur that is similar, that's where I learn and grow, right? Because it's where I get a human connection with somebody I respect. And where you started this was around something around basically vetting content, right? Yeah. And how do you make sure that you get good information in? And I used to chip away at this stuff, chip away at people's armor. And as soon as I found a chink in the armor, I was like, oh, disregard. That guy's full of shit. I found the fail point. And as I got older, I started to get better at recognizing that while we all seem to be full of shit in some area when we get pushed on something, most of us, certainly high performers, are really good in some other area. And if I can find that thing, that's the thing I want to hear about. And I might have to sift through the other bullshit you're going to say, but let me learn about this one thing.
Yeah.
But I think directly to your answer, I try to each month look at what my goals are for the month, and then align my reading material with my objectives for the month and say, hey, I'm going to be involved in sales this month or building out a sales platform, or I'm going to be heavy in marketing this month. What can I find that's going to serve me from that perspective?
Yeah, I love that. And it's actually when you answered that before, like I realized like I do a lot of the same things. Like I extract knowledge from my network by osmosis, right? Like every time I'm in town, I'm like, hey, Brad, I'm going to swing by the office. We'll catch up for 30 minutes. I'll pick up a nugget. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go get coffee. I'm going to go, so it's the relationships that create this positive environment that allow me to like lean in and do it. And I love that. And then I also love and you said this, and I'm going to summarize this for everybody listening. Shelf help does us no good, but thinking about like what your goals are for the month, planning out your day, coming down and be like, you know what, this month I'm going to be focusing on short-term content. What's like 1 to 3 nuggets that I can pick up to be messy? What can I let hit the floor? And what can I add into my ecosystem to kind of serve that need to go? So I love that. I love that.
Well,
Okay.
the other major one, the other major one I'd be remiss to not mention is Beyond a Million, is my podcast.
Yep.
Because truly that is the largest educational platform that I possibly could have, right? And it occurred to me, it serves tons of purposes for us, but it is Beyond a Million is designed to teach me sales, marketing, operations, technology, and taxation strategies for 8, 9, and 10-figure companies, right? All I do is interview these, 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs around those tactics. And it's totally selfish because I want to learn the things that are working for them, right?
Yeah.
And from the perspective from where I sit, right? Many of these people are clients. I know their financials, right? Because Easy Pay Direct gets to know those things. So I get these heavily vetted people that I know are executing. Now, those are not always in line with what I'm actually focused on, because it's kind of who I can, what the booking schedule is like when we book it out ahead. But that's the other major place that I go to learn. And this is just diving in with experts and asking.
I'd feel like that's like 95% of my consumption of like is just interviewing people like you. Like I literally have like a full page of notes of things that you said that are like, oh, reminders for me, or they're better structure, or that's a new model to use, or a different perspective to then go turn around and like, I'm going to open a Slack message to the team when we're done. And I'm like, hey, by the way, on the next team call, we're going to do boom, 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 check in on boom, 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 and make sure we align. And I think it really boils down to kind of start landing this at the very beginning. It's kind of beautiful to witness, like in hearing about Easy Pay Direct and how you get here in your podcast and what you do, like by design is like relationships are number one. And they're always at the forefront or the undertow of everything that comes down. And even to the podcast, like you get them at Easy Pay Direct, their clients, their friend circle, then you get to extract their knowledge. And so utilizing this intentionality of creating unique experiences, getting emotionally engaged with people and like being intentional. And I'll say this for everybody, the secret to relationships for me is intentionality. It's when somebody can see or feel that you went one step further than like, let's just meet for coffee or like, boom, boom, boom. It stands out incredibly powerfully. And it makes such a big difference. Like, I mean, I actually didn't talk to Brad for like 2 years. I think like most of COVID. And I was like, Brad, he's like, oh, dope. And like, you can pick up like that best friend that's left off. Like, it's not this obligation of like checking a box. It's the intentionality behind it that makes it so powerful. So I love that, man. So I'm going to start landing this plane so I can respect your time and get ready for another one. I like to ask this question because like this thing is loaded with knowledge. And by the way, if anybody's wondering, go do hard physical shit. Brad talked about this earlier. The relationship with yourself is like one of the most powerful things. And I'm going to say this because I have what I build in. I call it my SOS procedures, right? I teach this lighthouse model, right? And I know like no matter what in my day, sometime in the day or week with what I run, I'm going to get smashed with a roadblock, right? I'm going to get an emotional reaction in my body. I'm going to have like bad news. Like my wife lost her wallet last Tuesday. It's been 7 days. We haven't found it yet. It's so crazy that I can run multi-million-dollar businesses and a lost wallet put me on fucking emotional tilt. Like, I'm like, what's going on? And so I have this like I have this SOS. I have like my inner tools, then I have my inner circle and my outer circle. And my fail safe, like breath work, meditation, walking, those are great. The number one thing that works every single time is when I throw on my shoes and I go hike up a mountain. No phone, no nothing. Like a prolonged, like you talked about, a prolonged period where I'm going to have to be home in the circumstance, and I get comfortable being home in that circumstance. I get all my best ideas, the most clarity, the most emotional relief, the most resolve in doing that. And so for anybody listening, there's an incredible book called The Comfort Crisis. And it talks about this, and it talks about the term rasogi, which is a Japanese term to define what this is. And I would highly recommend it because it's probably one of the most powerful tools I've ever had. So just want to throw my 2 cents into my own podcast. And so then with that being said, I like to ask this question, and I feel like you're a man of principle, you're a man of resolve, like you're living this life. But I want you to imagine that everybody listening to this show just got Men in Black. Like they forgot everything that was heard, everything that was said, or they're tuning in on this moment. And you have the ability to tattoo some wisdom on their soul that they're going to take with them for the rest of their life. What would your tattoo wisdom be?
Man, that's so fucking heavy. Well, you got to drop that on me right now. I got to think about like, what are they going to carry for the rest of their life? Jesus. How about this? The things that you put into habit today will create who you're going to be 10 years from now. And so you need to start building the habits right now. And they don't have to be huge, but if you want to be healthy, have a healthy meal a day. Replace one of your bullshit meals with a healthy meal a day. That's step one. You can build on that later, but you need to start the fucking habit and do the V1 now and build on it later. But those things, because what happens as you get really busy in life is when you're an entrepreneur and things are expanding, you don't know when you're going to get back to that one focal point. But if you can put it on cruise control, you will have made progress by the time you get back. When I go back and look at goal sheets from, it's 2022 right now. If I look at like 2018, half of it is just done because I wrote it down and I started to take a step in that direction. And even if I lost focus along the way and shifted my goals, I still built a habit, put some momentum to it. I'm like, oh man, that thing just got done. That's amazing. So I'd say do it now, do something now to move towards.
I love that. That's good, deep tattoo wisdom for them to take forever. So like it worked. So like, yeah, I'm glad I asked. So, I was just on your show, which I'm stoked for that to come out. So can you let everybody know the name of your podcast, where to find it, and the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, it's Beyond a Million. You can get it on all the podcast platforms or beyondamil.com, because I have not yet convinced the owner of Beyond a Million to give me their URL, but it'll happen.
It's just a matter of time before you create a unique experience and an emotional engagement so that they give it over.
I love it. That's true. And then you can, you can check me on social. It's at Brad Weimert, Weimert. I kind of post my life and shenanigans and then clips from Beyond a Million on Instagram mostly. So that's me in my world. And certainly if you need help with e-commerce or online business, Easy Pay Direct got you.
They got you. They got every one of my clients, every single one of them. It's like my number one question. I'm like, where are you processing? They're like, I'm like, nope, go. They're like, oh, and I'm like, nope, go. They're like, oh, I'm like, nope, go. Just go. I love it. Yeah. And by the way, like for the record, for everybody listening, and I'm glad you said about who qualifies earlier, because when I was doing, $200,000 a year, it was no big deal. But I remember I did a launch and it blew everything out of the water. And it went from like 20 grand a month to like 300 grand in a day.
Yep.
And it took me 90 days to get my money. I had to prove I wasn't a thief and I wasn't stealing from people. And it wasn't like, oh, we're here for you. It's like, no, you're the criminal. You're guilty until you prove we're innocent. And I was like, I have people to pay. I have things to go on. And so I learned those lessons the hard way. So take heed with what was said. So man, thank you so much. We'll have to do round 2. I will shoot you a text and let you know when I'm in Austin. But thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here, for doing what you do, for living the way that you live, and actually just fucking caring about people. It means a lot and I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It's great to connect. Always looking forward to seeing you in person.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to cue the intro. So go check out Beyond a Million. Go follow him on the socials. You'll see him doing crazy shit. It'll only be a matter of time because we poked that bear a few times today before he announces some massive challenge that we don't know is coming yet. And make sure you stay tuned. So remember, relationships will always beat algorithms. You either see me in the next episode or you'll hear me in your ear bowls. But either way, we're out.